Hey guys, LMC here again. Welcome to another video. The day is beautiful, so we're going to go for a quick ride, and I'm going to address a question which I get asked a lot, which is that what I do for a living. I mean, I've mentioned that I'm a PhD student and I essentially study a lot, but a lot of people have asked me what that really means, so I'm going to go for a bit of a ride today and kind of explain that to you. So let's go. Alrighty, so what I am is a PhD student. A PhD just stands for a philosophy doctorate, or a doctor of philosophy. Basically, in layman's term, what that means is you're just a very highly educated person once you have a PhD. And in sort of real world terms, it basically means you get considered a quote-unquote expert in whatever area of research you specialize in. A lot of people make a mistake. They think that if you have a PhD, or if you're getting a PhD, that it means you're super smart and you know everything about everything. And that's not true. To be honest, I actually know a great load of jack about most things. Like, people are always surprised that I'm just a bloke like most any other people. It's just that I choose to study something very specific for many years, so I end up learning and knowing a lot about that very specific thing. But that's very different from just being a genius person who knows everything, because that's definitely not who I am. So in my PhD, I have a very specific focus on mental health, and on top of that I have a focus on a couple of mental health groups. So in my PhD I study essentially the brains of people with obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, as well as people who have sort of addiction to gambling, who feel like they have to gamble all the time. And I use my principal method for looking at these groups is something called MRI, or magnetic resonance imaging. And effectively what that allows you to do is to use a big powerful magnet to take pictures, high quality pictures of people's brains while they're alive. So this is different because some people in neuroscience would essentially look at post-mortem stuff. So they would take animals, and they'd take animals once they're dead and look at brains after they're dead, etc. And they do a very different type of neuroscience to what I do. But I'm more interested in the brain of living human beings, with different mental health conditions, essentially. So to give you an example of the sort of picture or image you get out of an MRI machine, you can get all kinds of images. One of them looks like this. So that actually, what you're looking at now, is actually a picture of my brain. So there you go. Some motor vloggers do face reveals. I'm going to do a brain reveal. And that's the type of image you can get from an MRI scanner. And from those types of images and other types of images, you can ask all sorts of questions. You can kind of see like certain regions of the brain bigger or smaller in certain groups. You know, do groups of people with mental health problems have brain regions that are shrunk compared to healthy people? Then with other types of images, you can essentially map the wiring of the brain. So the brain is organized in such a way that there are lots of regions at the surface of the brain, and then those regions, the idea is those regions do different things, they're involved in different processes, they perform different functions, but those regions have to talk to each other. So the way they do it is sort of underneath the surface, the brain is kind of wired up so that the regions can communicate with each other via what's called white matter pathways. So you can use the MRI machine to look at the white matter pathways and see if, you know, again, one group has slight differences in certain white matter pathways versus like healthy people. So you can say, okay, well, maybe mental health group X has some breakdown in the white matter pathways between certain regions relative to healthy controls. So then another type of thing, you can look at the brain's function. So as I said before, different regions at the surface of the brain are thought to be involved in different processes and be responsible for different behavior. And so you can look at the functional properties, how those brain regions communicate with each other. And again, you can look at how those communications break down in mental health groups. So you might have a region of the brain which you think is involved in, I don't know, processing reward for when people get, you know, rewards. And so, like for instance, someone who's a gambler might receive money from a gambling machine and get really excited, so a certain part of their brain will activate, but you might find that the activation patterns for reward are different in gamblers versus people who are healthy, and so that's the kind of stuff I can do. So that's basically what my PhD focuses on, is using all of those different technologies and all those different scan types from an MRI machine to essentially map out disordered brain networks in gambling and OCD. So the next question is, well, what does that mean from a day-to-day perspective? Well, what I spend most of my days doing is sitting at a desk. So, I mean, a PhD, at least in my case, a PhD is mostly a desk job. Again, other PhDs that look very different day to day, but mine is very much a desk-oriented kind of job. And during all that time at the desk, I spend a lot of time coding and programming. So, and the reason for that is that you need to be able to program and code in order to analyze the images that you get off the scanner. So I have proficiency. I've been using for many years things like MATLAB, Shell, Python, things of that nature. So if any of you are familiar with MATLAB and Python, etc., then I've been using them for a long time. So that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, analyzing data and also writing about it. So as a scientist, you have to spend a lot of time communicating your results and communicating the kind of work that you do through writing papers and in journal articles and giving talks and etc. and stuff like that. Then of course another big component of my day-to-day is collecting the data that I analyze. So I of course spend a lot of time recruiting people with, you know, with OCD or gambling, as I mentioned before, to come and do the studies I'm interested in doing, to get the brain data I mentioned before. So I spend a lot of time doing that, but that's kind of on and off. Like at the moment I'm not in the phase of doing that. What else? Well, and finally, it involves a lot of meetings, you know, meeting with people, discussing ideas, brainstorming, stuff like that, a lot of that kind of stuff. Also involves a fair bit of teaching. So I teach like undergraduate students in the classroom each year, as well as I sort of teach various honours students how to code and stuff like that. So a lot of people need to learn how to do the programming. So I teach them how to do that. But yeah, so that kind of covers what my role as a PhD student is, you know, broadly speaking, do research on mental health, practically speaking from day to day, a lot of data collection and a lot of analysis. So I suppose the final thing is, what do you need in order to become a PhD student if you're interested? Not that I imagine many people are interested, because it's fairly suicidal. No, I'm kidding, I love it. So I mean, you need an undergraduate degree, so you got to go to uni. Generally people have science degrees in some area, but neuroscience is one of those sort of things where people come into neuroscience from all sorts of backgrounds. So my background is in psychology and physiology, but like I've got one of my supervisors, his background is in physics and math, and other supervisors have clinical experience, you know, clinically seeing patients, etc. So people come into neuroscience research from all sorts of backgrounds, but generally speaking, you just need a science degree. A science degree of some kind. If you want to be in mental health, then a science degree in psychology is fairly useful for that. But for the analysis kind of side and the imaging kind of side, then more computational stuff is useful, like computer engineering or computer sciences. And those kinds of backgrounds are very useful as well for all the programming stuff. And then on top of a science degree, you need to have an honours degree. So an honours in neuroscience or something like that. And then you're good to go to get into a PhD if you want to do one. If you want to do one though, you do have to be prepared to be paid not a lot for quite a long time. So as a PhD student, you do earn some money, but it's kind of similar to what like an apprentice would earn in a trade. You know, so it's not much. It's kind of a sort of bare minimum, enough for you to get by kind of thing. Which is why a lot of PhD students like me, we do other things to supplement our income, like teach and work in other capacities and stuff like that. Yeah, but that's basically all you need. I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it to bits. I feel really fortunate that I love my job, because I know these days not a lot of people can say that. I mean, there's probably a fair amount of people out there who love their job like I do, but I'm also aware that there are quite a few people who either hate their job or B, are indifferent to their job. You know, they don't really care either way. A job is just something that pays the bills. It's something they turn up every day, and they just need the money to make the world go around. And when the times that they pursue the things they enjoy is outside of work, you know, so all of the recreational stuff outside of work is what they really enjoy in life. So I sort of count myself lucky that I love what I do, and I love being a PhD student. I love doing research. It's really difficult, it's very hard, but it's immensely rewarding and very, very enjoyable. So that's good. The downside of that, though, of course, is that it kind of sometimes ends up in a bit of workaholism, because if you love what you do, the tendency is just to not ever stop doing it. So I do end up working quite a few hours, work pretty long hours, long days sometimes, but that's largely self-inflicted. It's because I choose to take a lot of my work home with me and stuff like that. So yeah, you gotta kind of take the good with the bad. It's one of the drawbacks of loving what you do is that you don't want to stop doing it. But anyway, I'd rather love what I do. I'd rather spend the hours in the day really enjoying myself. But yeah, that's kind of a brief overview of what I do as a PhD student. For those of you who asked me quite a few times, I was really pleased when people showed interest in what I do. If you got any questions about that, maybe there's some people out there thinking about postgraduate study, or thinking about doing a PhD, or wanting to learn programming, or I don't know. If you've got any questions, let me know. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys. See ya.